a state in the grip of a full-blown maternity crisis. Now, we've known this is widespread, particularly in the north. One truly horrific incident was brought to light. Nicole Southwell was 12 weeks into her pregnancy when she was taken to the Ipswich Hospital and then left waiting for hours at an end. Now, tragically, Nicole then not only miscarried, but she was left on and sitting in her own blood-stained sheets with her dead baby beside her in a biohazard bag. Nicole has bravely spoken out about this experience.
Throughout that time, I requested something like some type of help as I was sitting in my own blood and it was going through the sheets. So they provided me a purple gown and an adult's diaper to sit in the waiting room with my fetus.
There are no words for what she's gone through. Joining me now, Queensland Opposition Leader David Crisafulli. Let's start with her case, David. We're a first world country. How the hell does something like that happen to an Australian woman in a hospital? I mean, she wasn't by the side of the road. She was at the Ipswich Hospital. The Minister says today that there's something about, we need to refresh the guidelines. You don't need a piece of paper or a set of guidelines to know that treating anyone like that isn't even human.
It doesn't get any more heartbreaking than that, to hear the pleas of a young woman like that. If that doesn't melt you, you've got a heart of stone. And for me, it drives me to want to do better. And the greatest thing we can do is properly resource our health system and make sure that those doctors and the nurses that are working at the front line are properly empowered. That's the greatest way to be able to free up every Queenslander to get a world-class service no matter where they live. Because when you hear stories like that, you know that things just aren't right at the moment in Queensland health. And every metric points to that, from ambulance ramping to surgery wait times to elective options. Every metric has fallen in the wrong direction over the last 8 years. Ambulance ramping had already doubled before we even knew what COVID was. It's now at 43%. That is the worst in the country. And then the question is, when will it return to the 15% that it was when this government came to office 8 years ago?
Yeah, it's more than just resources though, David, it's culture, right? Like, why wasn't her baby, her fetus, wrapped with some dignity? Why wasn't the mum allowed to have a family with her? Why was she left on a blood-stained sheets? I mean, this is, as I said, this is third world stuff. I mean, we don't do this in a country like Australia. But you and I have spoken throughout the year. You've got serious issues with maternity health services in Queensland. And I'll say for my viewers at home, Queensland's really unusual. It's the only place in the country where more of the population lives outside the capital city than anywhere else. Everywhere else, there's more of the state population in the capital city, not so in Queensland. What's going wrong, David?
You're right, Peter, and you mentioned about culture. Well, the former minister called it out. The culture isn't right at the moment, and that starts at the top. And when I talk about putting the doctors and nurses back in charge, it's about making them feel valued and respected. Now, you mentioned maternity services. We still don't have a date when maternity services will be restored to a whole heap of communities that have had it taken away. Now, I often talk about Gladstone, a city of 60,000 people that keep the lights on in this state, and women there can't have a baby where, when and how they choose. But I was in Cooktown the other day. That service has been on bypass for 18 months. Well, bypass looks a lot like a closure to me because there's no date when it's coming back on. People in Chinchilla, people in Weipa. These are communities where women have been able to have babies for generations and yet they can't. And I'm going to continue to call this out because if you want to have that magnificent state that you talk about that does have the decentralised population, you've got to have world-class services. You've got to have world-class health, education, housing, law and order. Those things have to be a given. And we are better than some of these stories. And we're hearing about another round table. Well, the round table has to have definitive KPIs. By this date, these services will be back online. Anything short of that is false hope.
Talk to me, you mentioned their power prices. There's a story that broke late this afternoon that regional Queensland are going to cop some of the biggest increases to their power bill in the country. How's that sustainable?
The biggest increase, not some of, the biggest, 28.9%, and in the southeast it's not far behind. So what does that mean? Well, that's an extra $420 for the average consumer every year. Now, if you read the report, there is a line in there that says one of the factors is the fact that the state government-owned power plants have been offline and remain offline. If you don't manage the resources you've got, if you spend money like it doesn't matter, if you don't have attention to detail, in the end, someone has to pay for it. And that is coming out of the hip pocket of consumers. That's a lot of money. At a time when Queenslanders are desperately searching for every dollar, interest rates are going up, water's going up, rent's going up, every cost you look around is going up. Imagine what people are talking about around the kitchen table tonight. After all the rises we've seen in Queensland, get another quarter into you in the next year. That is just unsustainable. And to know that we could have done something about it by managing the power plants we own, well, the fact that those power plants are in regional Queensland must really, really hurt people really, really deep right across this state.
I appreciate your time. I can see you're busy tonight, David Crisafulli, but you're never too busy to talk to my audience. Thank you for your time.